Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the last video in the Skymaster F14 build. I think I said that in the last video, but this is actually the last video of the build. Stay tuned and we will wrap this thing up. Boy, it's been a lot of work. It's fun though. All right, so last video we got tons accomplished, really too much to do an actual summary. In this video, we are kicking off with the canopy and cockpit installation. What we finished with in the last video was basically the landing gear and making sure it's working 100%, which we finally got it working 100%. Put about, I think, 12 hours into that landing gear and finding the leak. So it's a lot of work, but it needs to be reliable for it to be flyable. Okay, that's an important thing. Canopy should be fairly straightforward. We've got good access to all the canopy components and air system and all that stuff right in the front of the aircraft, so that should be fairly simple. I think the cockpit's going to be a bit of a challenge because it's a big cockpit and a little space to get that cockpit in, but let's hop into this thing. Just to give you a bit of a summary of what's coming up. It is Tuesday today, Tuesday evening. 1 week from today, we are heading down to Montana to get prepared for the Montana Jet event. And that's where this plane is going to be maiden. So we're driving down there on Tuesday. When this video comes out, I think it'll be Wednesday, the day we're actually maidening the plane. So if you're watching this video, we're probably maidening this plane today, which is cool. So anyways, guys, that's our timeline for this aircraft. We've got basically 6 more days to wrap this thing up. Should be done before that, but let's get this done. Okay, so last video we finished with the gear, but we also got all of these keepers installed here. Now we aren't going to put this rear keeper on the Jetty Central Box 400 yet because we have to plug all the receiver leads in and stuff. And we'll do that when we have David's radio here and we're all ready to use his radio. Right now we're just using the shop receiver with my radio. So if you remember back to the very first build, if you've been following along, there's 2 canopy latches underneath here. It's going to be really difficult to show you, but I can probably capture it with my mirror. But I can probably capture it with my mirror. There we are. So there's one of the canopy latches. You can see my cable holder there. And there's another canopy latch right there. So really slick system that Skymaster came up with for this canopy. That is absolutely very intelligent and well done, Skymaster. I don't often say that because we always have lots of problems to deal with on the kits, but that's a pretty cool setup. So basically what happens is the canopy goes in there, you pull those little tabs back, and it just interlocks with the hinges on the canopy, which is awesome. So we've got our canopy lock system here, or Jetronic valve right there. Okay, and then we've also got our canopy open and close, which will feed the cylinder that goes right here. Now the canopy lock has already been plumbed in the system. Both of those guys are already plumbed into the Zykoy controller. So kind of a first step here, what we're going to do is we're going to fire up the Zykoy controller, get the programming done on the Zykoy. So pretty simple. You've got 2 inputs. So what's going to happen? The canopy is closed and locked. So your locks are going to unlock. Canopy is going to open. When you want the canopy closed, canopy is going to close, and locks are going to lock. Pretty simple. We just need to plug in our little data terminal and get that set up. Okay guys, so we got everything lined up here on the canopy. We haven't installed the canopy yet. We're just making sure all the mechanics work. So with the gear sequencer in the down position there, our canopy is closed and our lock is locked. Okay, so now I'm going to flick the switch. You'll hear the canopy lock, and then A couple seconds later, cylinder comes up. Now we've got a restrictor installed in there, so it's a nice slow motion. And then we'll do the exact opposite here. So when I do canopy down, you'll see the canopy come down a little bit quicker and locks. Now we do have a leak in between the body and the aluminum cap. I did service these items before, or this item before I installed it, but I can actually feel the air coming out. And then if you watch the gauge there, you'll see it drop 0.5, 0.4, 0.3. So it's dropping quite substantially. So we need to make sure we get that taken care of. I think the other end is fine, the bottom end there. It's just this top end that's not too happy. All right, so I'll show you what's going on here. So when I took the cylinder apart originally, I took this bottom cap off. There is an O-ring on there, I know that for sure. And you can see on the top cap, there is no O-ring, which is no good. So I'm pretty sure we need an O-ring there. I think I've got a spare cylinder. I'm gonna pull that one apart and just take a quick check here. But I think an O-ring would be necessary there. And then on the bottom cap here, I actually put Loctite. Works great as thread sealer around that as well. So I'm going to check one of my spare cylinders and see what we got. Okay, so there's the stock cylinder that we had in there. Here is a spare cylinder, which is exactly the same dimensions and size and everything. And you can see that the stock one is missing the little O-ring. So now what we'll do is we will put a drop of silicone oil inside. And then we will get the piston installed. Put a drop on the other side. And then put a little bit on the threads, or on the O-ring specifically. And thread that together. Now that's back together, should be all good, but of course we're going to hook it back up to the air and confirm that we are in fact good. Okay, so canopy is all hooked up and ready to go. I've got one restrictor in there, but I'm going to add one more on the other side just to slow this down. You'll see when it closes it's a little bit aggressive. So let's canopy close. And you'll hear the locks. And then now we'll do canopy open, so the locks will open, canopy will open. I need to give it a little bit of help. Now you don't want to start adjusting this at this point because when you put the cockpit in here, that changes the geometry of those little tabs that this locks in with. So you want to do your final adjustment when you actually get the cockpits in. Don't start dicking around with it or messing around with it beforehand because it might be the wrong adjustment. And then we just need to give it a little bit of a push. So you've got all these little hooks here that interlock, that just basically slide in, right? So that's what you're adjusting when you get that cockpit in. But when you get the cockpit in, it screws into the side of the fuselage, so that can change this a little bit in and out, right? So that's why I say just wait till you get the cockpits in, then adjust it. All right guys, so I put a restrictor in the yellow line right there, and to try and slow the gear doors down. One thing that I found is this HSD Jets box does not seem to like restrictors on only one side. So I picked up some more restrictors and we're going to try putting one on the green side. Now this airplane was working perfectly until I added that restrictor in. Now when those gear doors close, there's a constant leak out of the vent in the airbox. Now, yes, I've confirmed it's coming out of the vent, so I'm thinking it has to do with that restrictor. So, picked up a bunch more robot restrictors today, so we should have a decent supply now. Other thing I got was my replacement rolls of power line, which is good because now we can get the last battery plugins done here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a restrictor right at the airbox on the green line, and hopefully that solves our problem and we can continue on with this aircraft. Well guys, there's not many times that I would really dislike or hate a product, but this thing is a piece of junk. Put restrictors on both of those valves. It was leaking from the air vent, and took the restrictors off, helped a little bit, but still leaking. pinched all the lines. It's not leaking from this side. You can actually hear it physically coming out of the box. All the fittings are tight. Not happy with this thing. So we are taking this out of the plane. It's already out. Should go in the trash bin, but we'll see. All right, guys, so we have completely redone the air system on this, this setup. So now our gear and doors are on the two Jetronic valves. They are sequenced with the Zykoi sequencer. Our air brake is still the same on the Zykoi Jetronics valve. And the HDS Jet's black box now controls the sequence for the canopy, and our wheel brakes is still done through there. So that's all the changes we've made. It actually probably worked out for the better because the Jetronic valves are better suited for the gear and also the Zykoi sequencer. I think the telemetry output will work just better with the Jetty setup and everything. So probably a good change there, but definitely a battle to get to this point. A couple things I did on the gear. So I also added a restrictor on the red line for the right landing gear, and that I drilled out just a little bit bigger than the micro hole. So basically the left gear is wide open. This gear is slightly restricted. Nose gear is a little, a lot more restricted. So what that does is it just allows the airflow to go here, here, and here, rather than dumping all the air into all the gear, and it just makes this more reliable. So I was having some issues with the gear coming down, and that seems to have made it better. So anyways, that's it for tonight. We'll continue this tomorrow. All right, guys, so I think we're finally settled on the gear and the canopy and all that stuff. Looks like it's good, and definitely a big chore on this aircraft, getting the stuff set up. So canopy, I'll cycle it here for you. Keep in mind that, again, it is not really set up because the cockpit's not in place. So there's that. So nice and slow on the down, and we'll see if it opens by itself. There we go. So canopy is much better with those two restrictors in there. The gear system, everything looks good with it. There's a couple kind of little finicky tricks here that I've kind of figured out. If I fill this gear system up to about 105, 104-ish, just cycle it. So now the pressure is sitting at 95. There we go. So quite reliable, definitely happy with that. Uses about 15, 16 PSI per cycle. So that is now at 89 PSI. And holding. So very, very impressed with the gear now that we've put a ton of hours into it, but that's awesome. So next thing to do is we're going to run our battery leads and everything up front here and get our plug-ins sorted out. Once that's done, then we can start fitting the cockpit and do our final adjustment on the canopy once the cockpit's installed. Okay guys, so we are now running our leads forward. So we need 2 power leads from the Central Box 400. Those are going to run 1 down each side. We need the program port for the Cortex. We want to run that forward. And then the terminal plug-in for the Zykoi sequencer right there. And that's going to run forward as well too. And then what we're doing is we're going to use this Pro Airframe RC for the XT60s. We're probably going to put it like this, and then we can have a turbine battery and receiver battery on each side, and then the receiver battery can just come through one of the holes there and plug in. So that should work out awesome. So we're going to get those leads run, and then we are going to work on the cockpit. All right guys, so front wiring here is complete. So we've got the 2 on the side there marked RX. We've got the turbine and the turbine with our air. So that has the compressor teed into it. Then we've got 2 servo plugs here. So one for the Zykoy sequencer. This is a 3-pin connection. And then the Cortex, which is like a bind plug. So the 2 outside connections. So that is all of our connections in the front of the aircraft. So what I'm doing now is just going through and making sure everything's nice and tight and clean and out of the way. So you can see on that side there, I've got it in my clips, and there's enough wires that it holds everything tightly. Then I put a zip tie right in the middle there. And then on this side here, there wasn't quite enough wires to hold tight in the clips. So what I do is I take a little bit of Velcro. So I get this really thin Velcro, which is really nice for bundling wires and stuff. I get this, I think, at Home Depot. But so I wrap that around the wires a couple times, and then it holds nice and tight in the clip, and the wires don't move. So last thing to do in this main compartment area is go through and goop all the connections. Now, we're not doing anything on the CB400 because it's got all the hold down items here. We still have to put a little bit of goop on our connections, our MPX connectors there. But the main thing we're doing is we're going through and we're gooping all of the connectors where they plug into something. So as an example, on the Cortex here, we're going to put just a little bit of goop on the end of those servo connections, just so they don't come out, come loose, any of that kind of stuff. So that's the last step of this area in the aircraft. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start to get into the cockpit installation. All right, guys, and it is time for another episode of Tip Time, brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. It's a good one for today. It's a good one. All right, so Skymaster cockpits are not the most amazing quality. They're quite brittle plastic, and this is the rear cockpit for the F-14. So out of the box, it came with 1, 2, 3, I think that's it on this one. 3 pretty significant cracks. The other ones have cracks too. But anyway, so we need to get those cracks fixed. High sol doesn't work. It doesn't stick to the plastic. I mean, you can use tape, I guess. But what I found that works really well is acrylic glue. In my previous life, I used to manufacture products out of acrylic and for aquariums. And basically, one of the things we used was Weldon 16, which this is basically a generic version of Weldon 16. So you can see the 16 there. Fast set, clear, medium-bodied solvent cement. Works for lots of different plastics, and it just happens to work with the Skymaster cockpits plastic. So, put this on last night. You need to give it a decent amount of time to dry, so it's been about 6 hours, and it is nice and solid. So just lay down a nice bead, and that is a great solution to fix these cockpits and glue them back together. It's one of the best things that I've found that works on them. And anyways, that's your tip time for this episode. Okay guys, so this morning I was kind of putting the cockpit together and needed some backing for our screws to go into here. So anyways, what I did was use the Weldon 16, added some 1/8" aircraft ply to this area right here, which is the front part of the rear cockpit. And now we'll have something for our screws to bite into. So anyways, I'm gonna get this back installed in the aircraft. It's pretty simple. I've seen some guys really struggle with these cockpits, but basically on the Skymaster one here, at least this one, if you take the seat out, the seat just screws in with a single screw here, and take the dash panel off. Basically, we can just slide the cockpit in like that. It's not overly terrible. So anyways, I'm going to get this installed, and at least initially, and then we will kind of go from there. All right, so cockpit is all installed and canopy is working well. So once the cockpit's installed, that's when you want to adjust the canopy. I've talked about that already. And you have a couple ways you can do this. So you can either open up the openings further, but I don't necessarily like to do that. What I like to do is sand our hooks here. So when you drop this down, you can see that these first two hooks were sitting a little bit wide compared to the slot. So all I did was take my Dremel and just put a little bit of a bevel on those hooks so they slide nicely into that first slot. The second set of hooks here, right there, this one was same thing, so I took a little bit off the side. The other side was perfect, so all I had to do was adjust these two and the back one on the other side, and canopy works perfect. So canopy close. And locks, and canopy open. Unlocks. Beautiful. Awesome, that's amazing. Okay guys, so I'm going to try and explain this as best as possible. So I've added a bunch of restrictors to the ScissorLink airline. So one on the red, two on the blue. Now I had a bit of a thought over the past day as to why this gear might suck. So this gear's been coming up now quite reliably, but what it's not doing is going down all the time, and it still struggles a little bit sometimes. So you do have to, manually cycle it a bunch of times, compress the wheel so it lubricates the actual strut or shaft by its with the oil from inside the strut. That's quite helpful, but of course when the plane's sitting on the ground, that's going to be a non-issue. Because we have it on the stand, it is an issue. So I'll show you what I was thinking of here. So when the gear's up and right now in the gear up position, the red line is pushing the main shaft this way, and the red line is pushing the ScissorLink air cylinder this way. Okay, so closing it that way. So what happens is when you signal a gear down, the air comes through the blue line, goes into the main air cylinder, but it also goes into the ScissorLink air cylinder right away, and it's pushing this way on the ScissorLink. So if I take the ScissorLink and push it this way towards the middle of the plane, this gear really does not want to rotate. If I take that ScissorLink and push it towards the strut, the gear really wants to rotate. So what I did was I added more restrictors on the blue side, so it's sitting kind of in a neutral position, which allows the gear to drop, and then as it slowly gets past the restrictors, it extends. So I've found that little tiny trick has made an absolute world of difference in this gear. I'll just show you guys a cycle here. Okay, so we're at 105 PSI, gear up. Now the air restrictor doesn't seem to affect the gear up at all. Now we're sitting at 95 PSI. There we go. So much more reliable, and that's cycle number 8 in a row that has been perfect. So very, very impressed with that. Let's go up to 100 PSI. So now we're at 100 even. Now the pressure does affect the up. So if we go at a lower pressure, it doesn't quite sink itself into the fuselage. And then now we're sitting at 91 PSI. Gear down. Still comes down reliably. So now we'll go to 95 PSI. We'll try a gear up cycle there. So it does almost make it into the fuselage. The door helps it closed. Right now we're sitting at 87 PSI, just in case you don't believe me. And we'll see if this gear actually comes down. Awesome. That's wicked. So definitely one of those stupid little aha moments. I was actually thinking about this earlier today while I was working on my house, and came in the shop tonight and I was playing with that scissor linkage, and yeah, and basically figured that out. All right, so just been playing around with the light setup here, and this program is much easier to use, much more user-friendly than the previous program. So all the new controllers use the new program. The old 8 Pro uses the old program. Of course, this is all available from the Unilight website. So anyways, we got the aircraft all set up here. Did a little bit of research on the interweb. And from what I can read anyways, it looks like everything is solid except the 2 lights on the verticals. So we've got those flashing, everything else solid. Easy to change as well too, so no big deal. But that is the current light setup. All right, an ordnance is mounted. It's all pretty straightforward. If you get the ordnance kit and Skymaster does all the mounting for you, all you really have to do is adjust your screws and everything. So our pylons here screw into the airframe fuselage. The pylons underneath the drop tanks, those screw into place as well too, but the drop tanks are keyholed. I initially wanted to call them wing pylon, but the side pylons here underneath the wing, those, one are keyholed, one you have to get lined up and screw it in place. Now, when Skymaster puts the ordnance package on the aircraft, they actually have pencil lines drawn so you can see where it needs to line up and everything. So it's pretty straightforward, and all the other items are just keyholed in place. So pretty easy. So when you're transporting this, to get the bundle off here, all you have to undo is one Phillips screw from this side, then it keyholes forwards and pops off. So that's pretty straightforward. The missiles here, the big ones, just pop off, so super easy. All right, so our cradle is basically complete. The gist of it here is this is the section that sits on the nose, and you always want to make sure you're sitting underneath a former, so you don't want to go anywhere where you're just into the actual skin of the aircraft. So the front support sits right on this nose section right there. The rear support, which is that guy, that spans from about here to about here. Now we've got a structural rib right there. There's another structural rib right there. So we're over 2 separate structures. Now the nice thing about this setup is it is tall enough that the gear can be raised and lowered when it's in the cradle. And we're going to put some foam over top of that back piece right there. We're going to put some foam over top of the little loop-to-loop in the nose, and that should work absolutely beautifully. Then we'll put some tie-down straps or bungee cords going across the aircraft with some foam on top, and she'll be good. So we're going to get our foam glued on there next, and we're just going to use some spray glue and spray it on here, spray it on the foam, stick those two together, and it works great. And you can use stuff like the white foam from Turbine Packing, that works. I've also got some over there beside my little RC truck. That's the same kind of stuff, closed cell foam. And we'll do the same thing on the nose. We only need to put little strips in where the angle is. So, all right, cradle is done, and very happy with the results. It turned out awesome. So quite happy with this. Obviously the gear is down. You can transport it with the gear down, which is nice. I mean, it can be up as well too, not a big deal. Main gear is down there as well. So we've got good spacing everywhere. Holds nice and solid on the aircraft. So when we lifted this up and put the aircraft on the stand, we just picked up the aircraft, and it held very, very nicely. So we've got double bungee straps everywhere as a just in case. Nice big hunks of memory foam. So it worked out really, really good. So really happy with the stand. I think it's going to transport this plane just perfect. So one little touch that I did here, So when you have a stand like this that the aircraft is basically always living in, it's nice to have a little spot to put stuff in. So I like to screw a servo compartment or a servo holder down. So there's some extra leg holders, which are the clips we talked about during the build that hold the legs down in the down and locked position. So we've got those two in there that are ready to go. All the spares, the little nose pitot tube, fake pitot tube thing that holds the nose cone on. And then we also have our CFG tool as well. And then in this side here, CFG bolts I've written on a piece of tape. Reason for that is we have our front CFG bolts still loose. So that's what the piece of tape's for, to let us know that we still have to tighten those guys up before we fly the plane. So that is everything. Okay guys, so the very last thing to do is the touch-ups on the plane. We're not going to do that tonight. I'm a little done with the 14, to be honest with you. A little burnt out on the 14 today. So everything's good to go on this, and we got some paint touch-ups to do, and we are doing awesome. So tomorrow is Sunday. Say hi, Ward. Ward's my helper.
Hi, Ward.
He's a big part of why this cradle got done today, so he's a good guy. So plan tomorrow is to get the touch-ups done and finished on the aircraft. And David's flying in on Monday afternoon, and we're just going to do some just final checks and stuff like that. There's really not a whole lot left to do on this aircraft. And we just need to take my shop receiver out, plug his receiver in, and just confirm that everything's working with his radio. So fingers crossed, everything's good. So that's pretty much it. Paint touch-ups to do left. I'll show you guys that, but we're really close to being done this thing and maidening it. So when you're watching this video, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Wednesday's video. And if it is Wednesday's video, the maiden's happening today. While you're watching this, the maiden's happening. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be real fun. So there's a video, obviously, that's going to come out of that. So anyways, we'll see you guys tomorrow to do the paint touch-ups. All right, guys, we are working on paint touch-ups now, getting really close. All the gray has been painted except the lighter gray right there. I've done all the dark gray stuff now, so things are going very well. We are oh so close with this aircraft. Almost done. I will cover very shortly what all the changes that I suggest with the landing gear are. Okay guys, so while we're waiting for the last bit of paint touch-up stuff to dry, let's go over our changes to make this gear reliable. So we've got the scissor linkage lines right here, which are the white lines. Now the blue line, which has two restrictors, is the gear down line. The red one, which is the single restrictor, is the gear up line. Okay, so that's the Robart restrictors we've installed in there. So that's the first big change. Second one is that piece of wood on the underside of the swing wing mechanism. So 1/8 inch ply in my case, that prevented the gear from over rotating, which you have to compensate for, which you want to minimize as much as possible. Okay, so that's the big system changes on the aircraft that you really need to do, in my opinion. Now, the other thing, all the gear issues come from this end nut right here and the resistance in this end nut. So number one, you have to run your low pressure in your legs at a fairly low pressure. When this thing's on the ground, it should squat pretty much all the way. There might be a little bit of travel left. That's the way it has to be. It has to have very little air pressure in the system. You can take this end nut and undo it about a quarter turn, half a turn. Basically just make sure it's not leaking. I've undone this about 1 turn, tried it, still doesn't leak. So but a quarter turn just gets rid of some of the resistance. So that's the other big change. Other change is a scissor linkage that Michael makes. Contact information is down below. If you're building a 14, if you have a 14, this is an absolutely necessary upgrade. It's worth it for the money. If you don't do it, you're going to be destroying air cylinders and the little ball heads on a very regular basis, every gear cycle or so. So those are the big changes that need to happen. Now I've come up with a bit of a list not even a bit of a list, a list that needs to happen pre-flight, maybe every single flight, but realistically, beginning of the day. So we have mounted our container with our little goodies here, and one of the other containers I have mounted, this is just an old fuel tank, is some silicone shock fluid. This is 30 weight, doesn't matter what it is, but something in the 30 to 50 weight is going to be fine. You want to use silicone stuff so it doesn't react with the seals. Okay, so step number one, you get to the field, you're going to take that silicone shock oil, you're going to put a little bit on your fingers, a drop or two, and you want to lubricate the main shaft right there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take this wheel and assembly and you're going to cycle it in and out about 3 times. That gets that silicone lube on the seal and makes everything rotate nice and freely. That's critical. And then what you want to do is just compress the scissor linkage, cycle the gear up into the fuselage, so just up and down, about 10 times, roughly. You just want to get things moving, and that's kind of the startup procedure. I found that if you do that stuff, the gear works reliably. Now, unfortunately, this is not a one-off occurrence. Every single person that I have talked to regarding this plane from Skymaster all has the same issues like this. So I'm pretty sure this is, as far as I can tell, the most reliable way to do things. Yes, it may seem a little bit gimmicky, I don't know, but putting a little bit of that lube on the shaft before you fly for a day, maybe every single flight, might be the ticket. Now, when you have this plane at the field, it's going to be sitting on the ground, and those are going to be compressed all the way. So I have tried just compressing those struts. That's not enough, I found, to lubricate the shaft properly. If you put a little bit of silicone oil on there, it's the ticket. So that's what we're doing to this aircraft. We are basically done this thing. A couple other little minor paint touch-ups. The other thing I'm going to do is we've got a couple of these no-step water transfers here, which are wrecked. We've got one here and one in the back. So I do have the water transfers. I don't know who these are from. But anyways, these are exactly the same scale as the F-14. So we're going to put a couple of those guys on and get them touched up. But ultimately, guys, that is the F-14 done. Huge, huge success. Very happy. The next success is going to be the maiden flight, which is coming up very soon. So when you're watching this video, it's going to be coming out on Wednesday, and that is maiden day. So really excited to see this thing in the air. So assuming weather goes good, checks and balances and everything go good, we will be flying this airplane the day this video comes out. So stay tuned. Obviously, that's going to be on video, and we're definitely going to get a bunch of clips of this F-14 flying, because it is a darn good looking plane. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this journey. It is by far the most complex plane that we have put together to date. There's a lot going on this aircraft, and that's the reason I think we had 20 videos in the build series. Obviously it could have been more, but I think we covered a lot of detail on this stuff, and I'm really happy with the ultimate final result. I think the owner David is as well too, and he gets here tomorrow, and I'm sure he's gonna have a big smile on his face. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching the series. I love doing this stuff. I love building aircraft, and this is just brings me a lot of joy. So don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Do me a solid, hit that subscribe button down below if you have not done so already. And thanks guys so much for watching. Thank you to all the shop donation people that have donated to the shop build. Huge appreciation for that. It's pretty awesome to see all the support and kindness come through from everybody. So thank you guys for supporting the channel. It's been a really fun journey for the past two and a half years. We'll see ya in the next video.